Oh, I think you got to stay proactive with it, don't you? I mean, you just can't throw all the stuff at your mechanic and then get it back and throw it in a bag and put it in your closet until the next year. You gotta know what's going on. I mean, and you as the owner operator, right? You're the one responsible for the airworthiness of the airplane. It's not the mechanic.
Well, that's true. That is absolutely right. And it's important to read over. I think if you're, say you had an annual inspection done and the A&P puts that sticker in your logbook, it's easy to read and everything, but maybe there's an error. And a lot of times it could be a transposed number or something
There
that
you
makes a
go.
big difference. So you need to be proactive in looking out for those kinds of errors.
You're listening to the Wild Blue Podcast, where, along with my co host and good friend Todd Mitten, we enjoy visiting with other aviation enthusiasts, covering topics important to aircraft owners, and just have some fun bantering about the ins and outs of owning and flying airplanes. I'm Chris Kirk, and in this episode, Todd and I talk about the little things that will impact the value of your airplane. A list of do's and don'ts, if you will. We're always looking for new topics or people to interview, so if you have an idea or a request, drop us a line at planes@flywildblue.com. And if you like this content, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe, and share. Hello and welcome to the Wild Blue Podcast. This is Chris Kirk, and back again, gloriously or ingloriously, we've got Todd Mitten. Todd.
Hey, Chris, good to be back. How are you?
Good. So Todd and I have been sitting here trying to figure out what we want to call this podcast. We're just going to label it the do's and the don'ts of maintaining your airplanes. He and I get a chance to see a lot of things, a lot of good things, really. But then we see those things, and you kind of scratch your head and wonder what in the heck is somebody thinking.
Well, I do think our listeners will enjoy some of this and they may have some ideas. I wish we could get some input. Because we're always open to new ideas. But yeah, I think we do deal with a lot of airplanes, a lot of owners, a lot of practices, a lot of maintenance shops, all of which allows us to see some really positive practices as well as some things that we recommend that make for better practices as an aircraft owner if you happen to be one.
And you can kind of, if you're an aircraft owner or a future aircraft owner, kind of file this in your hip pocket as something to remember that will help you preserve the value of your airplane and will make it easier for you to sell it when the time comes. Because there's a lot of little things you can do that just, they add up over time or they detract over time. And it's either going to make it more difficult or it's going to make it easier for you to sell and maybe even get you a little bit more money when you do sell them. And time's money anyway. So the longer these things sit on the market, the more it's going to cost you.
We've had that discussion before, haven't we? Where we talk about that very topic, that sometimes holding out for a little more money on the sale of an aircraft does not really help at the end of the day. But where do you think we ought to start, Chris? You want to start with some of the negatives that you've seen, or I've seen, or some positives, or where do you want to
go? Let's talk about some of the errors. And I think as we're in the business of buying and selling airplanes, we get a chance to see a lot of things right off the bat that kind of set the tone. First impressions are critical, really.
That's right. I agree with that very much. That's it's amazing how you can get turned off pretty quickly on an airplane.
Isn't it though?
Yep.
You go see it, you get one impression, but even before you think, okay, if I get a chance to peek at the records of the books, and it gives me kind of a sour taste, do I even really want to go there? And it may not be a fair assumption.
No, it may not be, and sometimes logbooks are old, and today many logbook entries are neatly printed and done on a printer and put in the logbook, and they're easy to read. But you go back to an airplane, perhaps it was built in the 1970s, and the handwritten logs. So you do have to realize that some of this stuff you need to take with a grain of salt. Sort of, you gotta say, well, I can live with that. But then that's not really what we're talking about, is it? We're talking about some bigger, more clear-cut issues, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Because I think you're talking about some of the records we would see where some of these guys, the mechanics, had just absolutely beautiful, almost calligraphy type handwriting, and it's kind of hard to read. It's pretty. I mean, it's
Hmm.
like, wow, these guys really could write, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter one way or the
No,
other.
I was just talking about creating a first impression. And so I'm saying you can't, I can overlook that, but what are some of the things that really legitimately create a more negative impression?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I see is what I would call minimalist entries. So somebody that puts in a logbook entry and it just doesn't give you much info. It says, well, annuals completed.
Yeah, excuse me, annual completed. Yeah.
That's great. What'd you do? There's no detail.
Or did you do?
Or yeah, that's yeah. You kind of feel like it's been pencil whipped, don't you?
Right, right.
And so that's one. And I think there's a balance in there. There's those folks that write, I turned this screw 3/4 of a turn, and that's a little on the excessive side. But you do want to describe what you did, what was done, part numbers.
So as an owner, how can you influence that for the mechanic that is, and by the way, we have a thunderstorm going
Yeah,
around here
little added
right
feature.
now. So that's why we're not flying. We don't fly in thunderstorms. But how can you influence uh, your mechanic to write up in your logbook? Do you have any thoughts? Do people do that?
Yeah. Oh, I think you got to stay proactive with it, don't you? I mean, you just can't throw all the stuff at your mechanic and then get it back and throw it in a bag and put it in your closet until the next year. You gotta know what's going on. I mean, and you as the owner operator, right? You're the one responsible for the airworthiness of the airplane. It's not the mechanic.
Well, that's true. That is absolutely right. And it's important to read over. I think if you're, say you had an annual inspection done and the A&P puts that sticker in your logbook, it's easy to read and everything, but maybe there's an error. And a lot of times it could be a transposed number or something
There
that
you
makes a
go.
big difference. So you need to be proactive in looking out for those kinds of errors.
Well, and you mentioned the transposed numbers. Another one that you see a lot is, especially on maybe a slightly older airplane, the tachometer's been changed or the hob's been changed a couple times, and the right numbers are not being added forward. And so you get to the point where, when we sell an airplane, we'll get in the logs and we'll look, and I'll bet you 80% of the time I find that the times on the airplane are incorrect. Sometimes significantly so. And that's because somebody, they're just now going off of what the current tack is, and they're not adding everything else in there. And the owner bought it that way and thought he understood it too. So you got to just stay on top of it. So
Sometimes they want to believe that those are
yeah,
accurate, and so they just forget
yeah.
about it.
They always seem to find out if it doesn't have as much time as they thought.
Yes, it's now that works that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things that I encourage people to do, and we do as well for the maintenance side of the business, is I want to see the log entries and I want to approve them before I pay that invoice, because I'm the owner operator of the airplane and I want to make sure that they are accurate. They reflect everything that's in there. And sometimes I think one of the things I just personally don't like to see is the word damage written in a log entry when there really was no damage that affected the airplane.
What's an example of that?
So maybe I think let's take a Cessna for example, or a Cirrus. It's pretty common. They'll get a little bit of I'll use damage, but they get a little wear and tear on the wheel fairings, rocks, pebbles slung into them, somebody stepping on them and breaking it, and a mechanic will write up repaired damaged wheel fairing. The problem with that is that now when somebody looks at it, they think, okay, this airplane has damage history. Now that's not damage history.
No, that is not.
And now you're tainting the reputation of that airplane simply through a poor choice of words. So something to consider.
No, that's a real good one. We've dealt with that in the past. What else are we thinking about here? Entries out of sequence. Let's talk about that going
Don't you
on.
see that a lot?
Oh yes, absolutely. I have.
Ethan was just bringing that up the other day. He was frustrated because he was trying to go through there. And what will happen is, now with the advent of stickers that have been, people have been using them for 30 plus years now. and then they'll stick it in a logbook. Well, somebody will just stick it in on a blank page or where there's space.
Mm-hmm.
And shoot, I've seen them years and years out of sequence. And so you get there, you're like, okay, there's got to be something missing here. And then you find it, 15 or 20 pages later, or more likely 15 or 20 pages prior.
So again, that's an opportunity for you as the owner, if you are the owner of the aircraft, to review not only the content of the sticker, but where is it? Is it in the proper sequence in the logbook, so that when you go to sell the airplane, it's more readable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And of course, with the logs too, I think the number one thing is just protect the doggone things and don't let them get stolen or lost or destroyed. Do whatever you can to keep that from happening.
Well, and beyond that, organizing the logbooks. How do you offer the listeners some tips on how you keep your sequence of logbooks, your types of logbooks, or what you've seen maybe, and how guys have kept those organized? Because I know one thing we've seen all
Yeah, we sure have.
every type of option there, from really really meticulous to oh yeah, we don't know, it's somewhere.
Yeah, it's somewhere. Well, you got to have either individual books or you're keeping electronic records now. I personally think the individual books are a little more, the physical book itself. They they lend a little more credence to the airplane than the digital ones. And the only reason I say that is because I think it's probably fairly easy to create a digital log entry well after the fact. And so I tend to place a little more value in the actual physical logs, but you need to have individual logs. Whether or not these are required by the FAA, but have logs for your avionics, have a log for your prop, for your engine, for the airframe. Have separate records for airworthiness directives. Um, if you can keep them separated like that, it sure makes it easier for the next guy. And again, this is part of preserving the value of your airplane, but it makes it easier for the next guy to go through them and understand the history of the airplane. And hopefully that'll paint a good picture.
There are a lot of different styles of logbooks, to be honest. There's the big 8.5 by 11 style. There's the smaller logbooks that kind of like, this was even true back in, now, because you and I didn't do electronic pilot time logging, but now everyone does. But back then, it was always a problem. As you got through one logbook, you had a different. Your second logbook was bigger or smaller
Right.
than your next. Well, the same thing goes on with airplane logs, which is inconvenient, but just find a way that works to keep them in an organized manner, in a perhaps a plastic. Gosh, what do I want to call those plastic?
Like one of those totes or
Yeah, tote like, or something that's
yeah.
like maybe put tax stuff in or something like that. But a good way to keep it safe and at least free from potentially water damage or something. Maybe not a
Right.
fire, but
I keep ours in a firebox,
that's a good
in a
idea.
fire
There you
safe. I
go.
know a lot of people keep them in like a safe deposit box at the bank.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because we over the years we've had people who've had them taken out of the back of their car and stolen. We've had mechanics who have held them hostage. We've had mechanics and shops who have lost them. We've had houses or hangars burned down. And I had a guy. This is the last call I got on this was probably a year and a half ago. A Cirrus owner called and asked if we had records because his shop, a fairly big, well-known shop, lost all of his logs, and he was in the process of suing them. And I thought, oh, that's so avoidable. If somebody would have just taken care of them. And moreover, in the course of when we sell an airplane, we actually create a receipt for those logs. So something I'd recommend anybody do, if you hand those logs off to a mechanic or whoever, get a signed receipt saying that they in fact have them in their possession, so you know who's got them and who's responsible for them.
Which is an inventory too of those logs, in the sense that maybe you hand off your airframe and your prop and your engine logbook, and those should all be annotated on that receipt, so that you can track each of those items. And when it comes to time to get it back, the person, whoever had them, can't say, well, no, we didn't have the
Yeah.
engine log. We only had the airframe, something like that. So,
Right. And that's exactly why we started doing that years ago, because we had somebody call up and say, well, we didn't get this. And we were able to track it down. So, yeah, you did.
well, and of course, it goes even beyond logbooks in our case because it was aircraft keys
Right.
and other anything else associated with the logbook that had to be handed off. Sometimes in the sales business, ferry pilots are involved and things like that. So
Yeah.
there's even additional considerations.
And I don't know if you do this or not. I'd be curious to know, but when, for example, if I take my airplane down to Mike, Mike knows ahead of time. I don't give him the logs. I don't give any mechanic my logs. And really, it's just for much of their protection as is mine. I PDF those logs. I make them available on a drive file or a shareable file. And they can get in there and they can look at them. They don't have to worry about storing them or losing them or anything like that. I don't have to worry about that. It's kind of like good fences for good neighbors. Keeps us all happy with each
Mm-hmm.
other. It works pretty well.
No, I keep my logs. I don't give them, and they get, and then I just get the printed.
Yeah.
Uh,
Are yours in books? Are they like the 8.5 by 11 books? Or are they
no, they're in the smaller
like a
size.
typical?
Yeah, but it's an experimental, and maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe newer experimentals would have some more the bigger type. I don't know, but
Right.
that's what I have.
The one thing I do see, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but I saw an airplane we had pretty recently. It seemed like every time there was a major change in who was doing the maintenance on the airplane, they wanted to start their own set of logs. And so they close out the existing set. I've seen them where they close out the existing set where maybe only a couple of pages have been used, and then they close out that logbook. There's probably 70 or 80 blank pages in there because they want it in that specific format. And I can appreciate that to a degree, but I was just thinking that almost kind of lends itself to losing one,
Well,
doesn't it?
there you go. That's the big problem. It's not so much the fact that not only did logbooks aren't that expensive overall, so, but you've lost some pages, so there's a little bit of lost value. But more importantly, you've just created an extra logbook now that will have to follow that airplane around for all the years of its existence, and that's inconvenient for
Yeah.
anyone from the next owner to people doing maintenance to a broker helping sell the airplane, a new buyer. Everybody has to deal with that issue that was just created.
Yeah. So as we're talking about just being a meticulous aircraft owner, kind of the do's and don'ts of things to do. Um, and as we maintain or starting to maintain quite a few airplanes now, and you see owners that are either very engaged, very active with their airplanes, or the other guys.
Yes.
And my personal practice is at an oil change, I get down on a creeper and I'll clean the belly. And I do it really twofold. One, because I'm anal. Everybody knows that, so I like to have the plane clean. But the other thing is it really gives me the opportunity when I'm cleaning it and getting down there, I can identify things that need to be addressed, whether especially on a belly, whether it's corrosion or occasionally I'll come upon loose or missing fasteners. Um, and so, what are your thoughts on that as far as taking the time to get out there and just show the plane some TLC and
Well, my first thought is really if you would, I think that you demonstrating that on my aircraft every several months would be of great value to me
yeah,
personally. But no, I mean, yeah, of course, looking at, and I do the same thing. I don't have quite as much surface area to cover as you do in my RV8 versus your Saratoga, but uh, no, I think that's a good idea.
but you've
And
got some polished metal too, though, that you want to
yeah,
kind of
I
take
need to
care of.
do, by the way, but it it pays off to keep your aircraft clean, keep it, especially the belly and all that. Man alive, we see some messes out there. You don't know if something is leaking. I mean, the easiest way to know something is leaking is if you've cleaned the belly and then you start to see streaks a few flights later. Well, you pretty well know you have a leak of some sort. Maybe not oil. So, I mean, a, a little bit is going to be potentially
Right.
expected, but other areas, maybe around the landing gear or something like that, could be indicative of a maintenance problem for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of you'll see folks that they never clean off the leading edges, and there's just bug spatter everywhere. Uh, they don't clean off their windshields, so it's and again, what gets me with this is I'll see those same guys drive up in a 75, $80,000 car that's spotless, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they don't want you so much as chewing gum in their car, but with the airplane, it's just a total different story.
I did learn about windscreens, really taking care of those from a friend of ours, Craig. I won't say Craig's last name, but Craig. Well, no,
Hmm.
he's been on the podcast
Yeah,
before.
he's
Craig Wilcox, uh, and Craig likes to fly formation, and that's where I kind of learned to fly some formation. And he was extremely protective of that windscreen. You got to be careful, even with that brings up a point. What you clean a windscreen with, what
right.
type of cloth, make sure it's not. Never, ever, ever, ever use a paper.
I was gonna say Windex and a paper towel,
Yeah,
right?
bad idea. Don't do that. Used to be, years ago, doing line service guys would do that all the time, and today it's changed. People don't want to touch that windscreen with anything that could potentially scratch it.
Yeah. Do you remember the stuff that you use? Because you've got the full canopy. That's a bigger deal.
Yeah, I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head. For some reason, I can picture the can, but I spray it on there. But the bigger thing is what the fabric is. You just got to be careful. You don't want something that is going to scratch that.
Yeah. Do you use a like a microfiber cloth, or do you use the disposable?
I just I use a cloth that I'm confident in. I guess I don't know if it's microfiber or exactly what, but
I
it
buy
doesn't
those ones that
scratch it.
are come in a stack of probably 100, and they're I don't know, they're maybe 12 by 12.
Hmm.
I get them from Spruce,
Oh, okay.
and then they're folded, and I think that they would be called a microfiber. They're a paper type product specifically for aircraft windshields. But, each one of those things is a buck, so you get that. They're not cheap. You get that stack, and I'll use them once or twice, and that's about it.
I
Other
may
than
look into that.
yeah, the rest of the time then they become an oil rag or whatever. But they do work pretty good. So
I was going to mention something that we do at Wild Blue Aircraft Maintenance that I think you might look to see if your shop does something like this. We feel this is very important, and that is adhering something to the surface of the aircraft. If maintenance is being done, it's very easy to damage the paint on your aircraft. Someone leaning into it with their belt buckle could scratch it. I
oh,
mean,
I've
it's
done
just
that with mine.
goofy stuff like
Yep.
that. A tool could be just dropped and you happen to be working over the top of the engine cowl or something, and it scratches the paint. So what our guys do is, and I can't think of the name of the
Well, you may
product.
have heard my phone just a second ago because I texted Ethan asking him. So he said it's called a protective 3M tape drape.
Tape drape, yeah, 3M
Comes in
tape.
a roll of, it must be what, 18 inches?
Yeah, it's maybe 2 feet even, but whatever it is, anyway, it's what our guys use they cover this surface area of the airplane where they're working, and that protects that because we do kind of pride ourselves on this level of service where we don't want to be nothing wrong with the shade tree mechanic, I guess, but we don't want to be that. That's
Right.
not our goal. Our goal is to be a little more.
Well, we don't
Uh,
want somebody coming back and saying, hey, you scratched or you dinged my airplane. And unfortunately, that's almost to be expected.
mhm.
It's, I think this stuff, this tape drape, isn't it kind of like almost like a post-it note?
Yeah, it kind of
The sticky
it
stuff on
sticks.
it.
Yeah,
but it's the whole back side of it, and it just sticks on there. And then the other thing that we do is we've gone through a couple of different iterations of products, and I think where we are right now is actually just using a yoga mat. But if you lay that on your wing walk or have the mechanic lay it on the wing walk, it's non-slip, it's non-skid, so they can step on it. It's not going to slide around up there. But it also protects a lot of that surface from things being dropped. You know, when a seat comes in and out of that door, it's so typical for either somebody to sit it down or to drop it right there on the wing, and it'll ding part of the wing. And
Yes,
so,
exactly. And that's the kind of stuff that we're working very hard to prevent. If your shop, you can watch these guys work a bit, and if you see these kind of practices, you can probably have some confidence that they are trying to maintain your aircraft closer to how you want it maintained and not just taking the easy way out. And that's exactly, I think, what we're trying to do is keep it.
right, just the little things here, the little do's and the don'ts. And so you had mentioned before about tool inventory.
Yes, yes. So I know in the Air National Guard unit, the Air Force too, I'm sure does this. They have a very meticulous process of keeping track of tools so that a tool doesn't get left in an engine or somewhere inside a fuel tank or whatever it may be. And the way that is to have every tool has its place where it goes. What would you call it? Where you put the tool in, and it fits right into a particular spot.
Right,
Not
right,
unlike if you've ever bought a socket set, and they come socket sets typically come in a plastic container, and each socket goes in the right size.
right spot
The
there. Yep.
the 13/16 doesn't, you have the 1/4 over here, and the 13/16 goes somewhere else, and all that. So uh, that's the way we treat things. Certainly, Wild Blue Aircraft Maintenance, these guys have a meticulous way to make sure that they've got all the tools in a proper place. Now, don't I don't know for sure if you could check a shop for that. You might be able to, I guess, but I'm sure it has happened. I know it's happened where tools have been left in an aircraft, and then it causes damage when they go to run the engine or whatever it may be. Certainly rags, stuff of that nature. So a good practice, and even if you're doing some work, a good practice is to make sure you don't leave anything. Keep track of everything, because there's an owner could be doing something inside the cockpit, even just
Right,
and 90% of the time it's not going to cause a problem. If something has fallen, you find, oh shoot, I wondered where that thing went,
right.
but it could.
It
So
could. Well, it's a good point. So a couple of years ago, I was helping a gentleman up in Des Moines buy a Saratoga, and took it to pre-buy, and he got it home, and I gave him a call. Well, this is a couple months later, and I was just talking to him, seeing how things were going. He said, what's interesting? He said that shop presumably was recommended and a high quality shop, but he said my first oil change, we pulled the cowling off, and there was an oil rag and it was either a ratchet or a hammer
oh
sitting
wow,
right there on
oh
top of
wow.
his engine,
See?
and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Uh, so you see that stuff a lot. Heck, Todd, we had I wonder if this thing is still flying. We had when I was in the Air Force, we had a T-38 that would go through NDT, so non-destructive testing. It's an X-ray, they'd check the wings and all that stuff. And it had in a compartment, a sealed compartment. You couldn't do anything about it. It would show up there was a ball peen hammer that would show up in the wing of that airplane every time it went through NDT, because when it was
Serious.
manufactured at Northrop
Ah.
Grumman, somebody had left that hammer in
Oh
there,
my
and there it
gosh.
sat forever.
That almost sounds like, I mean, I'm sure it was true, but it sounds like a story to
Yep.
illustrate a point. That's funny. That is pretty good. So I don't mean to, maybe you have some more thoughts there, but what are some other things that, that as an individual owner you can track at home that,
Well, you can do things like creating your own status sheet. And if you're listening to this and you want a copy of it, I'll send you a it's just a spreadsheet, and it's something that you can keep up to date showing when things are due. And I keep a little binder in the airplane, you know this, and I'll just throw it in there. And really, I do it just in the rare event somebody else wants to see it. But it's, it tells me when my recurring ADs are due, when oil change, when, of course, it tracks prop and engine and all that kind of stuff. It lets me know when the GPS databases are out of date, the VOR check needs to be done. I know there's a variety of other things on there. I can't think of what it is, but you can create your own. It's pretty easy. And I think it's just a way of keep staying engaged. And I think that's kind of the big picture here, isn't it? Is just stay engaged with your airplane. Don't, well, I shouldn't say don't outsource this, because there might be times to do that. If you're not of the mindset of being kind of detail oriented, maybe you should outsource it to somebody who can manage that stuff for you, because it's certainly not something that should be blown off and neglected.
No, that's true. And I will tell you that Chris does every flight, pulls out the binder, writes down. I mean, you check what the where you're writing down, I assume the manifold pressure, RPM, fuel flow,
Yeah, I do that.
ground speed, so on like that. Now that's a little different uh, than what we're talking about, maybe slightly different than say a VOR check or something like that. But it kind of points out being meticulous so that you can track any trends in your aircraft. Or now, of course, I don't know how you do it when I'm not there, because I usually I have to fly and then you sleep.
It's because I've been busy doing all this, Todd.
Well, it's a lot of work, I'm sure, but no, it's actually not that much work.
It really isn't, and that's just it. If you just take a little bit of time with it, it almost becomes second nature. And so it's really, it seems like maybe a little onerous to begin with, but it really isn't. I think once you get into it, it becomes kind of a muscle memory thing, and you just do it, and then I like it because it highlights to me things that I've missed, or things that I maybe would have missed had I not taken a little bit of extra time going through it.
No, it's very organized. It is smart. It's undeniable. It's a very smart way, especially because you fly your airplane. Your airplane is almost exclusively a cross-country airplane. Every once in a while, you might take a local flight, but would you say 90% of your flights, at least, are of some distance, which is such a great way to use an airplane.
Yeah. But there's lots of things. I mean, there's lots of people you can talk to, lots of people around the airport. Everybody's got a different opinion on it, I'm sure. But we would just encourage you to try to just be more active, take a more active role in this, so that you number one, know more about your airplane, and number two, you're going to help preserve the value of it. There's just no two ways about it. When you have things in order, and you know what's going on, the next potential buyer will appreciate
So
that.
I would say, to summarize, pay attention to your shop and the practices of your shop or mechanic. Pay attention to the details of operating your airplane and cleaning your aircraft, keeping it in good shape. Pay attention to your logbook organization and having a backup copy somehow of your logbooks, plus storing them in a safe place. And pay attention to what else? The tracking it day to day as you fly it, I think, is probably a valuable lesson.
Well, you've probably got a lot of different thoughts and ideas, and if so, we'd love to hear them. Our email is planes@flywildblue.com. You can reach us at 888-773-4249. And website, of course, is flywildblue.com. Appreciate you listening. And if you know anybody that you can share this podcast with, or if you haven't subscribed, please be sure to do that. We sure appreciate that. So again, hey, on behalf of me and Todd, thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Blue Podcast. Do you have an idea for a future episode? If so, send us an email. Our email address is planes@flywildblue.com. If you have questions about buying or selling an airplane, we'd love to learn more about what you're trying to do and what your aviation goals are. And if we could ask a favor, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others.